सावीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। So, my understanding of myself is what is the issue here. And what I do is associate the individuality or the ego with any of these levels, one or more of these levels. So the ego gets associated with the body, the ego gets associated with the prana, ego gets associated with the mind, ego gets associated with the intellect, and ego gets associated with the causal body also, Anandamaya. And this ego, because it identifies or associates, it also makes me a self-conscious person. So I am conscious of myself as a physical person. That's why we find people are always very conscious of their appearance. Always keep adjusting. And whenever we interact, then we want to present ourselves in the best way. That's why human being is by nature self-conscious. And we want to present a certain image of ourselves to the outside world. So in terms of how I appear physically, so in terms of what I wear, in terms of how I make up myself, so in terms of the hairstyle that I have, and we spend so much time on this. So what I wear, you don't even need to talk about it. So we spend so much time on choosing the clothes because we want others to have a good image about ourselves. That's primarily because we are self-conscious. And then the same thing in terms of my qualifications. So there is this social media portal, LinkedIn, so which is a professional social media entity. So when you read people's profiles on LinkedIn, everyone appears to be an Einstein. Whatever they claim about themselves, if it's all really true, then they're truly extraordinary. That's because I normally have a low self-image. And then I want other people to believe that I'm so great. It's because of a fundamental insecurity. Because I have a low self-image. I'm self-conscious. And because I'm judging myself, I have a certain opinion, I have a certain assessment of myself. And what I am, I'm not happy with it. Otherwise, if people did not have a low self-esteem, then they would not be presenting themselves, writing about themselves in terms of what they really are not. That's because of a desperate need to improve my self-image. And especially in LinkedIn, you find everyone has all the keywords that are attractive to your professional contacts. So that's because this ego gets associated with all these different layers. So this self-esteem could be, low self-esteem or self-image could be because of my appearance. I'm not completely happy with the way I look. No one is ever completely happy with the way they look. Even if it were the most beautiful person in the world. So whoever it is now, still they are also not satisfied. They have to spend so much time with their makeup people. And then present themselves in a certain way. So if they were happy, then you would not be struggling so much to present yourself in a certain way. Because you would just go as you are. That's because I'm self-conscious, and then I'm self-judgmental. Self-judgmental. And that is why I have a low self-esteem. And also, there is self-non-acceptance. Not accepting myself the way I am. These are all primarily because of the ego getting associated and then restricting one's opinion to a very small area. So that is the fundamental mistake. And then because I have this low self-esteem, I'm always trying to improve my image. So that leads to having certain desires. So I want to become this person. I am not this person. I am unhappy because I am not this person. And I want to become such a person. So that is a desire that I have. And everyone has such aspirations. To ask anyone, what do you want to become? Then people have a lot of ideas about what they want to become. Hardly you will get an answer. No, I'm completely happy with what I am. So if someone says that, then the society will think there is something wrong with that person. So because you don't have any aspirations. So I'm totally satisfied with what I am. So the society thinks that this person has a psychological problem. Because this person is not aspiring to be better. And for one to be successful in the normal world, it also in the relative world, then it looks like one needs a very strong ego. See, if you look at a lot of successful people, in fact, all the successful people, so only if they have a strong ego, so then they could push themselves. That I should do this. That becomes the motivating factor to be successful. That's why from the moment a child can understand something, that is what we also feed into the child. So have a strong individuality. Have a strong ego. So that is the primary requirement for success in the relative world. So this seems like a contradiction. So we find that the ego is the cause of a lot of problems, all the problems. But for being successful, you need a strong ego. So how do you reconcile? So what Vedanta says, or whatever spiritual wisdom says, is not to completely deny the ego, which will be there as long as one is alive in this body. But there is an imperative need to enlighten this ego. One cannot get rid of the ego, because as long as we are there, and the ego is what defines who I am. That's the question we are trying to explore. Who am I? So you cannot completely get rid of the ego, but at the same time you have to work with it. In fact, the ego has positive angles also. You get confidence from the ego. You get determination, again from the ego. And then you have motivation. It is all ego driven. But limiting myself to just this understanding in terms of what I identify the ego with, that is what is the problem. I am completely focused on what the ego is identified with all my life. I am only focused. My relationships are driven by the ego. Who I am. So that's why some people have this doubt. So if I become enlightened, then what will happen to all my relationships? So will I completely dissociate? And will I cut off? It need not happen. But at the same time, the strength with which I am connected, that will weaken. Because at this moment, my opinion of myself is purely restricted to what my ego is connected with, is identified with. When that ego gets enlightened, then I will have a completely different understanding of myself. So this will be the outcome. So it is imperative that I allow this transformation to happen, instead of trying to fight it. Generally, I fight it. How can I How can I give up my ego? Because every thought that I have, it arises from the ego. In fact, that is the subconscious assumption that, or conclusion that I have made, that I am an individual. I am a discrete individual. So I am separate from the world around me. So there are only these three entities. One is me, and then the world around. It may be people, but still it's all part of the outside world, not me. And then there is God. If one accepts the existence of an Almighty, it is inevitable, but still. So there are these three entities: me, creation, the world, and God. And my strong conclusion is that I am distinct from the creation, rest of the creation. And I am also different from God, naturally. So hopefully no one thinks that they are God. So if they do, then they need some help. So I am very, very clear that God is different from me and I am different from everything else. And that individuality or ego is what we are trying to question. How are you saying that? How are you saying you are a distinct individual? So then I will have all these answers. I don't look like you. But then I can come and say, you don't even look like yourself some time back, from some time ago. Then how do you establish, how do you prove that you are the same person? So you can say fingerprint or a retinal scan. But fingerprint also, when you grow older, that slowly gets erased. So what I'm trying to say is that if you really try to prove, you cannot prove conclusively by yourself that you are the same person appearing in a different form as a child. You can say, you can ask my mother. So, or you can ask my relatives. But then they become the reference point. So this I that you are calling yourself, in fact, that cannot be proved at all. And then you say the kind of qualifications that I have, or what I studied, if you say. So I've studied this, I have this degree. So someone has to ask some question from what you studied in school. We have forgotten most of it. Most of what we studied, we have forgotten. Then if that is the reference point, then someone can say that you don't even remember. So then how do you prove? But thankfully, we get a passport or some identity card. And then say, now you cannot deny. But truly speaking, this I is something that cannot be established without a reference point. This individuality. That is the truth. I can never prove myself. Prove that I am a separate individual. Without any other reference point. So what is this individuality? It is just for transactional purpose. It is accepted by everyone. So you accept the other person as a certain individual, and then the other person accepts you without questioning. If both begin to question, then both of their identities will disappear. So, husband and wife relationship also. It is like that. For some reason, because the person appears in a certain way for a certain length of time. So that is why if one has not seen the other person for a long time, then you cannot even recognize that person. So you have to be showing your face. So for you to be accepted as this person. So the point of all this discussion is that on inquiry, the ego has nowhere to stick. But at the same time, we have to accept the existence of the ego, individuality, and that is purely for transactional purposes. And this is where Vedanta tells us that because you cannot deny the ego, as long as you are alive, it will be there, connecting to something or the other. Even an enlightened person cannot get rid of the ego. But what happens is the ego gets enlightened. It becomes a wise ego. Earlier it was an ignorant ego. Then it becomes a wise ego. And this wisdom is not purely some theoretical wisdom. But this is deeply assimilated also. That purely for transaction, I relate with other people as an individual, which is necessary. But other than that, I am far bigger. In fact, the whole universe is just that single consciousness, which is what you will have to arrive at. And this wisdom is possible only to human beings. Because we are very uniquely privileged. We have the free will. And proper exercise of this free will, so that will result in this wisdom. That's why I said the other life forms do not have this possibility. So we are uniquely privileged. And this results in me being totally at peace with myself. In fact, for real wisdom, one need not struggle. Because it is always available. You have to struggle only if suffering is for suffering and agitation, I need to struggle. But for peace and wisdom, I don't need to struggle. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to do anything. You just need to reorient yourself. Correct your understanding. That's the easiest thing to do. Because for doing anything else, there are a lot of variable factors that are at play. If you want to accomplish something, like even this place that we are sitting in now. So for making this place, there was a lot of people had to work and there was a lot of struggle. And it all had to come together. But if I want to become wise, then I don't have to depend on anything else. For every other work, I have to depend on other factors, external factors. But for wisdom, I don't have to depend on anything. So this is the easiest thing to do. So finding the answer to who am I is the easiest thing to do. But unfortunately, that is the least sought after also. And that is the only way I can be at complete peace with myself. Because as an individual, I will always be inadequate. I will always be imperfect. As I said, I'm always self-conscious, self-judgmental. So if I'm self-conscious, self-judgmental, then I will always be unhappy with who I think I am. I will be inadequate. I will never be completely satisfied with myself. Because what I am really seeking is perfection. Everyone is. We are all seeking perfection, but in the wrong direction. Trying to be perfect as an individual, or trying to find perfection in some other individual, which we will never find. Because creation is imperfect. Fundamentally, it's imperfect. Creation may be more perfect than our own thoughts and imperfections that we have, mindset that we have. But still, it is not completely perfect because it's changing. It's not flawless. So, we are trying to find perfection in something that can never be perfect. And the real I alone can be perfect. And that is always available. You can never run away from the real I, the perfect I. Not my understanding of I, but the perfect I, which is the source of all this imperfect I also, the ego also. That is always available. So all my pursuits, they have to eventually lead only to this question. Or they have to only help us answer this question. Generally, we have different pursuits. So we broadly divide the various pursuits that we have into 4 categories. So the primary requirement or pursuit of every human being is for fulfilling one's basic needs. Those are the primary requirements. Basic needs like food, clothing, shelter. So those are the primary needs. And once those needs are satisfied, like I said, animals stop with that. Not even clothing, food and some shelter, which also they make for themselves. Many creatures make their own dwelling places. So these are the primary needs. And then after those primary needs are met with, then human beings start getting creative. So we don't stop with that. So that is why to be creative, you should always be dreaming, not be satisfied with what is there. So that is when we feel that we are creating something. So you have human beings start having desires. Various kinds of desires. So as I said, so we have this huge list of unfulfilled desires. And at the later part of our life, we also have a bucket list. So before I die, I have to do all of this. A bucket list. So I never stop. I just don't stop. Because of the primary reason that I think I am inadequate, incomplete. I am limited. So this is the primary reason for having desires. So this goes on and on and on and on, forever. And then after some time, because of some grace, or many of us feel actually the need to reach out, help, and then support in some form or the other. So contribute. Contribute not necessarily for any personal gain, but all kinds of service, which one does with a certain amount of selflessness. All selfless work. So that is the third kind of activity. First is, I said, activity required for fulfilling my basic needs, artha, and then activity needed for fulfilling my desires, kama, and then activity required, selfless activity that I do, which is also called dharma. And then some privileged people, some blessed people, they also start working towards what we call moksha. So asking the question, is there a way out of this madness? So is there a way out of this craziness? Or am I condemned to continuing this way forever? So this lifetime, okay. So I will have some moments of happiness and a lot of struggle in between. And then grow old and die. Then next lifetime I come back. Start from the beginning. Different set of problems. So I have been doing this over so many lifetimes. Even though we don't know, but we are all here because we've been doing this over so many, maybe even thousands of lifetimes. And in this lifetime also, I will do the same thing and then die. So some people at some point, they get tired of this routine. And then ask the question, who am I? So because whatever I'm doing is because of my opinion of who I am. Is there something more to life, or am I just condemned to just go being like this? So that pursuit is called moksha. In fact, in and through all other pursuits, a human being is only seeking this freedom or this wisdom without even knowing. So wherever I am seeking happiness, I am in fact seeking permanent happiness. All of us will be happy with, if I am happy all the time. And that is a constant, that seeking for happiness is a constant. So in and through all the activities, I am only seeking the real I, and that happiness is only, can be found only in the real I. I am seeking myself, but unknowingly. So that inquiry, spiritual inquiry, so that is called moksha. So this is, and when one starts inquiring, then slowly one gets more clarity about oneself. So this is why we should take this inquiry seriously and then pursue it for our own good. Instead of condemning ourselves to this repeated, going through the same thing again and again. The inquiry will help us release ourselves from this chain. In fact, the inquiry alone will help us get released from this chain. And that is the only solution. We'll stop here and come back. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.